Hey folks, welcome to the Tieto Permaculture vlog. My name's Nick, and I'm actually filming this afternoon. This is actually filming in the afternoon for once, so I decided to switch up the little intro a little bit just to do something different here. I've been working all day. This is actually the same, this is on Thursday. I decided to film a second vlog today because I'm finally going to build a compost pile at last. So today's vlog, that's what it's going to be about, building the compost pile. I'm basically going to just kind of walk through what I did to prep for the compost pile, all the materials I need, make sure they're all ready to go, and then we're actually going to build it. So we're not going to spend too much time introducing because I think it's going to be a long one anyway, so let's just get started now. All right, I'm standing at the top of our property right above the chicken coop, and if you look right below me, just the other day this was all overgrowth, viney overgrowth, all the way down the fence line. It started from all the way up here, right here, straight down the property boundary was all this overgrowth. I probably have a shot. If I do, I'll leave it above there. I think I was just talking about this yesterday's vlog or the day before's vlog, so I'll leave that linked above if you do want to take a look at it before. I'll just make sure that I find that for you. And yeah, so today I came through, and then right at what I basically do is all these vines are basically climbing over from the pasture on this side over here. You can just see this is just a whole bunch of overgrowth on this side of the fence. So, but instead of actually cutting all this down, I could go onto the other side of the fence here and then cut everything down on the other side to prevent as much growth coming over the fence. But instead I'm allowing it to grow so I can harvest all this green material to use as the green material for my compost pile. So in a compost pile, just to kind of start from the kind of basics, the beginning and everything, you need three main materials. You need a kind of brown material, woody material. That's kind of a high carbon material. That tends to be food for like the fungi and like the long-term fungal networks within your compost pile. It also kind of absorbs a lot of the nitrogen, and it kind of uses those two interact, the carbon and the nitrogen interact within the pile. So the woody material, that woody stuff, the brown stuff, that high carbon stuff, that kind of acts as like the sponge to soak up all of that nitrogen. That's a very kind of basic way to put it, but it's just kind of an easy way to think about it. So that's the high carbon. And in a compost pile, looking for a carbon to nitrogen ratio of about 25 to 1 to 30 to 1. So 25 parts carbon, 1 part nitrogen, carbon-nitrogen ratio. So that's what you're kind of looking for. So you have to kind of determine what the different amounts of carbon from the different types of starting material you're using. And that just kind of takes a bit of learning, and I'll talk about that when we get down to the actual material. So you need the brown stuff, that's the first thing. Second thing you need is the green stuff, and that's what we're using here. And I'll keep talking about that in just a minute. And then the third thing you need is what Dr. Elaine Ingham calls the party food. And most other people will call it just like high nitrogen food or material. And that usually comes in the form of some sort of manure. In this case, I'm using a combination of both horse manure and chicken manure from my actual coop here. So I'm kind of adding diversity by also using horse. I harvested the horse manure actually from just across the way in this pasture, and I have two videos, two vlogs about that. I'll link one of them just above here so you can take a look at it if you want to see that leading up to this moment here. So you need to get a lot of material to build a compost pile. It takes quite a lot. So you need at least a cubic meter. That's like 1.3, 1.5 cubic yards. Something like that, because just the conversion factor, you can look it up, but about a cubic meter. So that's a decent amount of material. So you really need to be thinking about making sure you have all the material you'll need in order to start your compost pile beforehand. It's much easier to get everything ready beforehand, and then once everything's in place, build your pile. So I spent most of today just gathering everything, making sure everything's ready to go, and now we're actually getting to the pile. So we'll head down this way. I'm going to talk a little bit about the green that I harvested and why I'm using it from right here, just to explain kind of my process, and then we'll keep going on the build. So yeah, this is right next to my chicken pen here. It's between my chicken pen and the fence line of the property. And I like to keep this open so that I have a nice easy access way so I can come through and harvest right along the edge here. So you can see all the stuff right along the edge I just came through and cut. So it's all pretty fresh cuts along here. And I'll basically cut it right at the top and to pull down all the kind of viney growth down here. And I gather all that. I just throw it on the ground below me, and then you can kind of see there's a bunch of it still on the ground here. I don't ever take all of it just because honestly, to be completely honest, I'm just lazy. I don't want to rake all that up, and I don't need that much because I already have plenty. And if I do need more when I'm building the pile, I know there's excess here. So I do like to leave, if I can, some growth on the ground, whether that's the growth that's naturally here. And if I don't see any growth and I see a lot of bare soil, then I like to leave a little bit of that kind of mulch down. So I'm not taking everything from the fence line when I cut it. I might be leaving some behind. So all along this fence line, I cut, and we actually have a calabasa growing on the fence. So when I was doing this area, I was just really careful not to actually sever the original vine, which actually comes through all the way over here. So I think this is actually a male vine. I don't think it's actually going to produce any fruit, but I'm still trying to just keep it alive so I can keep moving with it. So you can see down here, this is kind of what the fence looked like to start with. Just a lot of this viney overgrowth, really, really big vines. This stuff goes crazy. It's a kind of mixture. It's like tropical kudzu. I think this is it. Something like a kudzu, same kind of family. This looks like a kind of like a morning glory type plant here. So there's just all this stuff that grows abundantly here in the tropics. You can see all the way down the fence line. This stuff just grows like crazy. So this is a very great resource for me because it's a great green material, because especially the kudzu itself, or like that three-leafed one here. I'm actually not sure if it's kudzu, but I'm pretty sure it is. This guy right here, this is a leguminous plant. So it actually already has a pretty high nitrogen content. So I'm actually getting a little extra nitrogen by using those plants as part of my compost material, which is great for me. So to start with, once I got all that green kind of viney growth going, what I did is I made a big pile of it right down in this little area, and I started to cut it up into small bits, because you don't really want, especially with vines, if there's a lot of growth and a lot of those long slender vines through there, they get really tangled, and then it's really annoying when you have to turn your compost pile. So I just took a hand scythe and I sat there and basically chopped it up, flipped the pile over, and just kind of kept chopping until I felt like I could easily pull a handful of stuff out of the pile without it tangling. That's kind of my goal. So I did that with two different greens piles, and once I finished with both of those greens piles, chopping them up, the chickens actually, of course, got really interested in them, because they like all that kind of small green stuff. So they started checking it all out for me. But I took all the greens, brought it up, and made a big old pile within the actual chicken pen right near where I'm going to make my compost pile. So I'm actually prepping for my compost pile by making sure I have all of my material right next to where I'm going to build it. So this area, this is the big greens pile right here, and you can see right above where the chickens are, there's a big pile of kind of browner material. So this is all the bedding from inside the pen here. So all this, I basically raked it all up. So all this is kind of brown stuff. So this does have some manure mixed in. It's begun to decompose, which is great. And it's going to act really well as a kind of fungal network throughout my pile. So again, just as a reminder, the green material down there, fresh green material, tends to have a carbon to nitrogen ratio of about 25:1. That's just naturally what they have. And so if you're looking for kind of to help balance your pile, that's kind of what the green material in a compost pile is. It's kind of help balancing, because it's right at that ratio that you're looking for, that 25:1, 30:1-ish. It's kind of, it's a range, but that's generally what it is. And that's just like if you look into the actual, like if you took a microscope or you figured out the chemical makeup of the actual plant, it would just have a ratio of about 30 carbon molecules to about 1 nitrogen molecule, or 25:1, or whatever it is. So you don't necessarily need to understand that kind of thing. Just know that leafy greens tend to be about 25-ish to 1, 30:1, somewhere right around there. So you can use fresh grass, you can use fresh leaves like green leaves, anything, weeds that you're pulling from your garden. You can use mown grass if you have a mower and mow it up. That gets that really, really fine. And the only problem with kind of freshly mown grass as your green material is it ends up being like basically super high nitrogen. So just kind of keep that in mind. If you are using mowed grass, make sure you add a lot of extra bulky woody material, because you're gonna have a lot of nitrogen in that mowed grass thing. And also the mowed grass tends to kind of clump up into small little clumps, and that prevents airflow. And that's a really important part of a compost pile, is having that airflow. So moving right along, we have the woody material, like I said. That's going to be fungal pathways, and that's just all the bedding that I've been collecting over the past. I keep adding in more mulch, more mulch, more mulch, and that just starts to decompose, and so that's going to be my brown material. I'm also going to use in the compost pile itself some of this, which is basically pre-composted material. You can see just it's the leftovers from when I harvested the past few times in here. Some of it's not quite broken down, some of it is, but this is also going to be a material that I'm going to use as brown. You can see there's lots of little woody chunks in here, so this will also be sprinkled throughout. And because this is already partially decomposed and has gone through the composting process, it's actually likely full of beneficial fungi already. So that's really going to help me with my pile when I'm starting it, to make sure I have that woody ratio, that high carbon ratio. So once I kind of had all my woody, the brown stuff and green stuff in place, I got all my manure. So the manure I took from underneath the chicken coop itself. So I just kind of pulled everything off, and I kind of separated into two piles. One of them is actually just like the bedding mixed with manure, and that's right here. And this stuff is basically, it's pretty high nitrogen just because there's a lot of chicken manure in there, but it is mixed with all that bedding. So it's probably a pretty good balance of material, but it does have a lot of nitrogen in it because of all that manure. So I'll be able to use that throughout the pile when I just want to add a little bit of a mix of things. And then in this bucket, after that, I kept scratching and got down to the base layer and then cleaned out the actual coop of all the manure that was in there. And I put it in this bucket. And again, this bucket is also full of a little bit of kind of debris and carbon material as well, and that's fine. But this is going to be, I just kind of have it ready in a bucket so I can take it and add it to the compost pile. And then I also have horse manure. So what's important with horse manure is you don't want huge like clumps of the manure. It kind of comes in big old clumps. So what I do is I actually just use a garden fork, and just in a bucket I'll just kind of spin the actual garden fork in there just to break up all the clumps. And then as I'm building the pile, I'll just make sure that if I do find any huge clumps, I'll break those apart so that in the middle of those kind of clumps of manure, it has a tendency to stay anaerobic. No air can get in there. And in those anaerobic conditions, you can have not so great microbiology growing and populating. So you kind of want to avoid that. So as you build it, you just take a look, and if you see a big old clump of manure, you just make sure you just kind of squish it up and spread it around a little bit. No big deal. In this bucket here, I have more manure, but this is manure I just harvested today. So I just went over there about an hour ago and got this. So this stuff is all really fresh. So I'm going to make sure I separated that. I'm keeping it in a separate bucket so that I can use that in an area where I want a lot of nitrogen, super rich in nitrogen, likely right towards the center of the pile, because I want that center of the pile to get really hot. And we'll talk about that in just a little bit. But so I have in this separate pile, I have my fresh manure, and I also have this. This is comfrey. If you haven't seen or heard of comfrey before, this is an amazing powerhouse of a plant. It's really often used in the permaculture world. And this plant right here acts really well as a compost starter, is kind of what we call it. And essentially it's very dark green leafy material. It has a decent amount of nitrogen in it, and it also has a lot of minerals in it. So it actually is just like this big old kind of clump of good stuff, and I put that right in the center of the compost pile, and it's really good food for the bacteria. They're going to start reproducing, and it's the microbiology reproducing that causes the heat in your pile. So when you're building a compost pile, you got to think about, you're trying to create an environment that's perfect for the microbiology that you're trying to grow. So in this case, the main thing you're trying to grow in a compost pile is bacteria. And bacteria like to feed on like green leafy things, like nice fresh food, grass, straw, hay, fresh greens, anything like that. The bacteria really love to chow down on. So you want to have a decent amount of that. And then you need food for your fungi. That's the other thing that you're really trying to make reproduce a lot within your compost pile. And the fungi like more of that woody material, that stuff, that high carbon material. It takes a longer time to break down, and that's what fungi like. They like to spread across all that, kind of spread out all their little hyphae all through there and start decomposing that kind of high carbon brown material. So that's where you're trying to go for, guys. You're going for trying to grow bacteria and fungi. And then naturally, as you have that reproduction happening, all the other predators that eat the bacteria and fungi will come into the pile, and that is what's going to actually cause the nutrient cycling within your soils. Once you get your compost finished, having that full soil food web in there, that's what's actually going to give you nutrient cycling for your soil and everything in there. So pretty cool system. So think about compost not necessarily as you're creating food for your plants, you're actually creating food for your soil. And you're actually inoculating your soil with all those beneficial bacteria and fungi and all the other things in the soil food web, protozoa, the flagellates, the ciliates, well, not so much ciliates, those aren't so good, but the nematodes, the good nematodes. There's basically one bad kind of nematode, which is the root feeding nematode. And but if you have the proper balance of aeration and all the different types of the soil food web, it's pretty rare to have those root feeding nematodes as long as you're keeping things lots of aerated, lots of air and oxygen moving through there. So that's what you're looking for. That's the goal. And so yeah, those are the ingredients. So once I have all my ingredients ready, again, you can see right in here, everything's really close to where I'm going to actually build my pile, which is actually right in the pen, right next to the chickens right now. It's actually going to be right down here. So everything's really close, so I don't have to go far. The couple things you need, just kind of the tools that you need, is you need a water source. So I just have my hose hanging up right here waiting for me, because you want all your material to be at about 50% moisture. So green material, that's naturally kind of fresh leafy greens, that already tends to have about a 50% moisture content. So the green stuff you don't have to worry too much about as long as it's freshly cut. And then the browns, all this woody stuff, that's the stuff that takes a little longer to soak down. So I've actually soaked this pile twice today with the hose. And it's important when you're doing this, if you can, try to use either well water or not chlorinated water. Basically, you don't want chlorine to go in, because the chlorine is not so great for your for the soil food web and the microbiology down there. They don't love that. So you actually want to make sure that you're trying to take out that chlorine somehow, either with a filter or from well water or from rainwater, if you can do that. So there's a lot of different ways to do that. Just think about that. It's just going to help. If you can't do it and the only way for you to build a pile is with chlorinated water, it's going to be just fine. I've done it so many times. It works, right? But it's just trying to give the best chance to the compost pile to succeed. Try to use non-chlorinated water. In this case, I'm actually using chlorinated water because that's what the city water is here, and I don't have a rainwater catchment system quite yet. But in this woody pile, which is the one I really soaked a lot with the water that is chlorinated, since this has already started to break down, there's likely already a decent amount of humic acid in that, just because that's the natural thing that happens when you have fungal growth. It's a fungal food, and it naturally happens as like that carbon material breaks down. So that humic acid actually neutralizes the carbon. So my bet is in that pile back there, it actually already has a good amount of humic acid in there. So me spraying it with a little bit of chlorinated water, it's actually just going to be soaked up by that humic acid right away, and the chlorine will no longer be a problem. So now that I have all my stuff ready, it's time to get the actual base of the pile all ready. So I already did this earlier, so I'll just play the reel of me doing it. But what I used here is a bunch of sticks and brambles, and the goal is essentially to have an area that's slightly lifted and has lots of air space underneath it. So you have nice, good airflow at the bottom of your pile. That's just going to help keep it from going anaerobic, that kind of negative stuff. You don't really want an anaerobic pile. You want it to be aerobic, so lots of air and oxygen can move through the pile. If your pile goes anaerobic, it tends to favor the not so great microbiology that's down there, the stuff that you don't really want in your garden. So you just want to make sure when you're doing this, you always have lots of air, lots of pore space for all the oxygen to move through. So at the base of the pile, what I used here is actually palm fronds, and I just kind of I folded them in three and kind of laid them out in kind of a slightly rotated star pattern, and that gave me a nice lifted base that will be good to get lots of air underneath my pile as it's kind of starting up, and to give it lots of oxygen. So now that I have all that ready, it's time to actually start building the pile. So we're going to start talking about my process for that, and you guys are just going to kind of watch me do it, and I'll work my way and talk my way through it with you so you can understand. And I recognize I'm going to do lots of kind of videos on compost, so don't feel like if I'm not explaining everything or I left something out that you're never going to get that information. I will cover it. And please, below this video, any questions you have about this process, my process, anything about the soil food web, anything about compost, leave a comment, ask a question. I'm happy to answer those, and I will answer those. So don't worry too much if I didn't quite get to your question, or if your question isn't answered, just reach out and I'll make sure I answer it for you. All right, so I don't think I actually finished the kind of tools you need. I think I got carried away on something else, but essentially all you need is a water source to make sure that your pile's wet enough, you have enough moisture content, a pitchfork or something that you can scoop in and spread everything off. Just, it kind of depends on how you're doing it. I oftentimes will just use my hands and just grab it. I just wear gloves. So if you're wearing gloves, I tend to recommend gloves just because you're going to be around a lot of manure. So not getting that all over your hands tends to be good, but you know, do whatever works for you. But as a safety guy, I like to always say, wear your gloves, because then you don't have to worry too much about what's getting on here. So to start with, I'm actually going to use a layer of brown. And there's so many different ways to do a compost pile and build a compost pile. There's so many different methods. So the one I'm giving you is basically the one that I use on a regular basis. And don't worry too much if it's not the same as one that you've used before or anything like that. Because there's so many different methods, it's just about finding the right recipe and the right way that works for you. In this case, my goal is to have a compost pile within my chicken system that my chickens are going to help me turn and help me process. So I'm building it in a way that works for that system. If I had some and I wanted to use some, I might actually wrap the base of my compost pile in what's known as hardware cloth or welded wire, basically like that stiff wire that you use, that you could use at the bottom of the chicken coop. It's kind of usually a grid pattern of some sort, really strong. Fencing of some sort. Chicken wire doesn't work so well just because it's a little bit too flexible, but something like that where you can just wrap it around and then you can bungee cord it together. So you have a nice form that all you have to do is dump all your material into, and it keeps a nice upright form. For me, because I want the chickens to interact with this specific system, I don't like to add that, have that kind of ring around there, because I want the chickens to be able to jump on top and interact with it the whole time. I might at some point, if I need to make sure the pile gets up to temperature without them disturbing it, or maybe for the first turn or two, I could add one around there and close it up and then just start building the pile within there, and then just keep the chickens out of it for a couple days as it reaches up to temperature. Then I can turn it, close it up again, let it get up to temperature again, do that 3 times to make sure I hit like a nice, get rid of all those weed seeds, all the pathogens in the center of the pile. And then after that, just let the chickens go to town on it. But for me, what I've found works really well is just letting the chickens have access to it all the time. So that's what I'm doing here. So this is, again, my method. There's so many different methods out there. The Berkeley style compost, I'll leave a link up to one of those there. Elaine Ingham uses Dr. Elaine Ingham, she uses a bucket system, kind of similar to what I'm doing with the manure, but she has everything in buckets, pre-soaks it, and then everything's just kind of ready to go. For me, I just pile up all my materials, have it nearby, and then I add it in as I'm building it. So whatever works for you, you're going to find your method and your rhythm to make this happen. And that's what I actually recommend. I don't recommend learn from people who know how to do it, but then find a way that works for you and works with the materials that you have available to you, because everyone's materials are going to be different. So I'm going to start with brown, just because that's kind of what I like to do. And I already have some brown down here, because I like to at the base of my pile have a nice layer of brown so it can soak everything in before it hits the bottom there. And what I like to do is just make sure that I have a nice level pile, because I am on somewhat of a slope here, so I want this whole thing to be level. So as I build it up, I just make sure that I keep checking on that to make sure it's a nice level pile. All right, there's a little layer of brown. Next, I'm going to add a layer of green. And as I'm doing this, you see how there's all these vines? Some of them are still stuck. So I'm going to grab my hand sickle. All right, got my hand sickle, and I'm just going to cut them up as I go, just to make nice small pieces that will not get tangled when I'm trying to turn this pile. It's better to have smaller pieces. Smaller pieces are going to break down faster in general anyway. And then having not long viney things while you're trying to turn the pile just makes it so much easier to actually turn it. So as I do this, I'm just going to have my sickle nearby. I neglected to mention that earlier, but if you're not working with vines, you shouldn't really need it so much. But it is nice to have a machete or a sickle or something around so you can actually cut up anything that's a little bit too bulky. If you have a chipper, like a wood chipper or a shredder or anything like that, You could start by putting everything through a shredder, have nice small bits. The key is though, if you're shredding things and you have really small little bits, you just need to make sure you maintain your pore space in there. So make sure you have nice large wood chips or something that you're adding in there to give lots of kind of air space for things to the air to get through there. It's really easy if you have lots of really small densely packed materials to get not enough oxygen flow through your pile. And in order for the microbes, the beneficial microbes, to reproduce, they need oxygen. It's just like us. They want to have the right amount of water, the nice right atmosphere, nice temperature, enough food, nice yummy food. You just gotta think of all these microbes. It's just life. They need pretty much the same thing that we need, just in different kind of amounts and all that. All right, so green, brown, then green, and then I'm gonna add a little manure. In this case, I'm just gonna add a little bit of my kind of bedding that has a decent amount of manure in it, just to start using a little bit of that. So that'll be a nice little, just because I'm towards the base, I want a little bit more material to start everything off. And then I will add a little bit of this manure. And notice I'm not using my manure that I'm saving kind of for that center of the pile first. That really fresh stuff I'm going to save for the center. For the rest, I'm just going to use the stuff that's slightly older. And you can think of the manure, you don't need, a bunch of people say different ways to do it. You can use a third, basically a third brown material, a third green material, and a third of manure. I find that if you have that much manure, the pile tends to get a little bit too hot too quickly, and that can cause a little bit of problem. So I use a little bit less of the manure ratio and a little bit more of that higher woody material, because that's also going to give more food for the fungal growth. I'm looking for a little bit more fungal growth in my pile, so that's why I'm adding more of the woody material, because I want about a 0.75 fungal to bacterial ratio. So that's another thing that's kind of good to know for compost piles. For most crops other than your brassicas, you know, your kales, your collards, all that kind of stuff, broccolis and everything, those like a little bit more of a higher bacterial ratio. Specifically, they want more actinobacteria, which is a type of bacteria that's more filamentous. But most other crops and most of the crops that I'll be growing want a little bit more fungi, like 3 fungi to every 4 bacteria, which is about a 0.75 ratio. 3/4 is basically, you know, 3/4, which is 75, you can call it 75% or 0.75. So that's kind of what I'm going for in my ratios as I'm doing all this. So I'm looking, when I'm building the pile, I want a little bit more carbon, a little bit less nitrogen, and then a nice even amount of green. That's kind of my go-to recipe. So another layer of brown. And again, guys, lots of different ways to do this. I like to do just layer by layer, because that just works for me. Another really good way to do it I've seen is you basically use a tarp. You lay out the tarp, you put a bunch of the material together, roll it around so it gets nice and homogenized and mixed up, and then add it to the pile. So there's so many different ways to do it. Do what works for you, do what's easy for you. Do whatever is gonna make you actually build a compost pile, right? That's what you're looking for. All right, I have another layer of brown, and usually it's around the brown layer that I start thinking about water. So I'm looking now, you want about a 50% moisture content. So if you grab a handful of whatever you're putting on there and you get it nice in there, you squeeze really tight, you should see 1 to 2 drops of water come out. That's what you're looking for. That's about a 50% ratio of water. And I do not have that, and I also don't have water because I forgot to turn the spigot on. So let me go do that real quick. All right, back with water again. So every time I get to a brown layer, the high carbon layer, whatever you're using for that, I like to just give it a little bit of a soak if I'm not quite sure. A good method to do is actually, if it's going to be rainy, like overnight or something like that, leave all your stuff out, let it get soaked overnight, and then you don't have to worry about actually getting it wet because it's already wet enough. Another method that's really good is if you're using a bucket system, you can just put everything in the buckets, add halfway full of the bucket full of water, and then add all your material. And then overnight, it'll soak up all that water, and then that's about a 50% ratio. If you have 50% water, and then you fill the bucket up with the rest of your stuff. So just so many different ways to do it, guys. Use what works for you. Use what's easy for you to remember, and we'll use what will actually make you actually build a compost pile. All right. A lot of times when I build this, if I have it set up right, I'll actually just leave this thing spraying, leave the hose spraying on there the whole time. But sometimes I find that ends up giving a little bit too much water, so I'm not going to do it this time. All right, green layer. And you can think about this kind of as building like a multi-layered cake. So that's a nice easy way to think about it while you're building it, is you need your brown layer, which is kind of like the actual cake itself. You put the cake down, first layer down, the big old cake, a little bit thicker. Green layer, you can think of maybe your frosting. You're putting whatever kind of like that topping, or if it's a pizza, then you have your dough, and then you have the green layer being your kind of sauce. And then on top of that, your toppings, or if it's a cake, maybe some sprinkles or something like that, or decorations. And then I think of the manure as the toppings or the decorations, depending on whatever metaphor you want to use. So you want a lot of cake, you want a lot of frosting, or a decent layer of frosting, not a huge amount, but a decent layer. And then the sprinkles, you don't want a huge layer. You want kind of a middling layer of that. So you can see I just kind of spread it out, so I have a nice layer all around, and then I just keep going with my layers and layers and layers. So brown, green, manure, brown, green, manure. I'm going to keep doing that. When I get to the center, I'll pause and I'll talk to see what's next. All right, so you see, well, as I'm building my pile here, since I don't have a form, like a circular form or anything to build it up against, as I'm building it, I'm making sure I'm keeping it nice and cylindrical, nice round and pretty much straight up on the sides. You can build them to be pointy, and most people do. They just throw it in there and make it pointy, but if you have that nice cylinder, you're gonna have a nice big dense mat of material, and that's kind of what you want. So it kind of has all that nice thermal mass and everything that it needs to actually reproduce quickly and well. So I like to make a nice wide cylinder and build up and up and up. All right, so at this point I'm close-ish to the middle of my pile. So what I'm going to start doing is adding the more fresh manure as I do this. So I just added my brown layer, and I'm also going to use my previously composted kind of woody bit to try to inoculate the center of the pile with something, with some of those microbiology that might be there in this older compost. I'm going to inoculate the center of that pile with them. And then remember I was talking about that kind of compost activator, that's comfrey. So I'm just going to put it in this layer. I'm just going to cut it up a bunch and sprinkle it through, and I'm actually going to put it right in the center, just that little bit. I would add more if I had more, but I don't. That's all I have. And then I'm going to use this nice fresh manure. I'm actually going to leave a nice little, a good amount of it right here, and I'll save for the next layer. I'll do the rest of it. And again, when you're working with this, see the big clumps like this? You don't want big clumps of manure like that. So take your fork or take your hand or whatever you're using and just kind of break it up a little bit so you have a nice, no big clumps, just small little pieces in there. Sometimes it's easier, if you're wearing gloves at least, maybe not with your bare hands, but sometimes it's easier just to squeeze it with your gloves. Just make sure you give your gloves a nice wash after that. By adding that nice high nitrogen in the center of the pile, I'm really encouraging the bacterial growth to boom there, and that's what you kind of want. The bacteria is going to be the first thing that really reproduces very rapidly, about every 20 minutes, and that's what's going to give you that heat in your pile. So I just added brown, that manure, and a little bit of green, a little more green, help, because this is what the bacteria, again, this is the center pile. I want a lot of bacterial growth, so I'm going to add a lot of bacterial foods right there, right in the middle. All right, and we'll keep going with the brown. Other examples of activators to put in your center, manure, really fresh manure, that's a good one. You can use urine even. Urine's good. It's really, really hot urine. It's about a 1-to-1 carbon nitrogen ratio, which is probably the highest you're ever going to find. In this case, I have some bananas that started to rot, so I'm actually just going to put them right in the center of the pile, and they're going to end up being, they'll start rotting down and give me a nice middle part, and all this stuff will be eaten up really quickly by that kind of biota. So I'm actually just going to kind of rip it apart a little bit, and it's starting to rot already, so I know it's definitely time for it to be kind of decomposing. It's already starting to decompose. So I'm just gonna pull up in the temperate atmosphere. Nettles are really good as a compost starter. Anything that's really kind of deep green leaves, like the comfrey, something like that has really deep green leaves, that's usually good as a compost kind of activator. Yeah, just keep thinking about those kind of things. Things that are easily available to you that might be a really good bacterial food. That's what you're looking for, a nice bacterial food. These bananas that are starting to decompose, lots of sugars in them, and the bacteria is gonna love all that sugar. I'm noticing that I'm starting to run low, quote unquote, on the brown material. I'm actually gonna get some wood shavings that I have that I use for bedding, and I'm gonna add some of that right here, because that's a lot of nitrogen that I'm adding in with all that manure and all this banana stuff. There's gonna be a lot of nitrogen in here, so I just want to a little bit counterbalance that. So pause for 1 sec. If you're liking woody material, wood chips, you can get usually wood chips delivered to you for free. If you have anywhere, there's this app called Chip Drop, at least in the United States, where you can just kind of write in, I want this kind of wood chips. You can actually specify what you don't want, what you do want. And any arborists anywhere that have wood chips from taking down trees, which they often do, they have excess, and they actually have to usually pay to dump them. So instead of that, they love just dumping them somewhere for free. So you can actually get free wood chips just delivered right to you. That's not really the case here in Puerto Rico, unfortunately, but in the States, that's a really good way to get high carbon material for your compost pile really quickly. All right, so I just kind of balanced that little high nitrogen in the center a little bit with that woodiness, and because this stuff is bone dry, I need to soak it. All these pine flakes, they're really, really dry. And again, I'm using this because it's what I have. You got to find the resources that are available to you, because it varies throughout the world. Whatever is easy to have for you, easy to get for you, easy to acquire. Ideally, if you can acquire it on your own property, that's the best, because then you don't have to pay for it. It's just right there. It's just you maintaining your property can give you the material you need. And I have a very small property here, so I have to actually think about bringing carbon in. But if you have a bigger property, it should be no problem to find enough carbon on your property to use for this kind of pile. So you can see I'm soaking it quite a bit, and I just tend to soak a little bit on the heavy side because I want to make sure there's enough moisture in the pile. It's really easy not to have enough moisture. It's also easy to have too much moisture if you go way too long, but what I usually look for when I'm doing this is when it starts to drip off the sides and everything, I stop and I keep adding and adding and go from there. All right, set some green on top of that. Usually I would add manure, but I just added a lot of nitrogen, so I'm just gonna go skip a manure layer and add some more brown. I'm gonna continue to add this pine shavings now, because I am pretty low on my. It's always a woody material, guys. In my case, I'm low on. You'll probably find that's true for you too. You think you have enough, and then you start, you're like, ooh, whoops, not quite. Break up the clumps. Just keep remembering to break up the clumps as you build, and spread everything out. Make sure that everything's nice and uniform throughout your whole pile. If you're doing this layer method, make sure it's uniform. Spread everything all the way out to the edges. Having a diversity of manure is really good, because there'll be different kind of materials that make up that manure. So poultry manure is a little bit higher in nitrogen than horse manure, so it just adds a little bit of diversity And different types of microorganisms like to feed on different types of food. So having a very big diversity of food within your pile is a really good thing and really helps or help you guarantee that you have the right mix of microbiology. The order of the layers doesn't really matter so much. It's just about getting all the material on there. So if you don't quite have the right layer by layer thing, that's not what matters. What matters is the ratios of everything. All right, well, you guys stopped filming for a while, so I don't really know where I was left off when I stopped talking. So just kind of go over the general idea of what I did here. Is I layered in my system. I'm just using a layered system. So I'm layering each layer, the brown, green manure, brown, green, nitrogen, brown, green, nitrogen, brown, green manure. It's like manure and nitrogen are pretty much interchangeable, but you may not be using manure, so just think about it like nitrogen. Manure is high nitrogen. So towards the end here, I basically continued up, and I was actually running low on brown materials, so I brought in some pine shavings just to add a little bit more brown, just to give me some more material. Use a large diversity of material, both in manure. If you can get a couple different species of manure, that's great. Large diversity of green material, large diversity of woody material. What that does is it gives different foods for the various organisms in the soil food to feed on, the bacteria and the fungi. There's so many different types of bacteria and fungi out there, and each one likes a different type of food. So making sure you give enough food for all the variety of different types of organisms is really important when you're building your compost pile. You can see here I finished up with a layer of brown, more or less. There was a little bit of green in there, but I like to finish up with brown because it helps kind of seal the pile in and keep the pile nice and tucked in. You can, just like mulching in the garden, same thing with a compost pile. You kind of mulch the top to keep all that moisture in and protect those inner layers. So I'm giving it a nice deep soak just to make sure that there's enough water in there, because I did not soak this stuff overnight and it's been pretty dry recently. So I'm just giving it a nice soaking. And what I look for is water dropping off the side of the pile. That tends to be an indicator to me that that's enough water. And the real way to tell is if you take a handful of material in your pile and you squeeze it really strong. You see how I'm getting a lot of water pour out? You don't want that. So I've watered the top of this too much, but that's going to kind of move its way down. So in the center of the pile, it's likely a little bit less. But when you squeeze it like that, what you're really looking for is like as hard as you can squeezing it. You want to look for like 1 or 2 drops. Here I'm seeing again a lot of drops, but I just really watered the top of this to force the water just to move down around. So like I said, I'm telling you how to do it. You see me watering it heavily just because I know we're in the tropics here. I'm in the tropics. This area right now, it's going to be under this tarp after I turn it once. I like to start it uphill and then turn it downhill. So once I turn it the first time, it's going to be under a tarp and I'll have more control of the climate of it. But until then, I know this is going to dry out because the sun beats down in here and this will get a little bit dry. So I just give it a little extra water than I think it might need as I finish the pile, just to kind of get everything started. Because if I go down here even a little bit and some of this, it's not nearly as wet as that, just that top layer there. So it's really, when you're doing that moisture test, dig into the pile, get a nice little clump and then squeeze. And squeeze as hard as you can, and you're looking for 1 to 2 drops. That's your 50% moisture. That's what you're shooting for your pile. Just saw a little bit of a dry spot there, and there you go. With these kind of piles, if you're doing that layer system, one good way to kind of know if it's done is I can kind of see, I can jiggle that, kind of moves like a jello mold. I'll get you a little closer so you can really see it. See how it kind of jiggles, kind of like a jello mold there? That's what I'm looking for. That gives me a decent indication that I have some good airspace in the pile, because things are able to move a little bit, and it's also just fun to jiggle the pile when you're done with it. So if you look from this side, you can see that's about 3.5, 4 feet tall. That's kind of what you're looking for. You want that kind of 4-foot-ish mark with a circle that's about 3-4 feet in circumference, and that's about the right amount. On this side, because I am on this is a angled terrain here. From this side, it doesn't look quite as tall, But overall, I have a lot of mass in that pile. And you can see the chickens everywhere. I've just cleared all their bedding material. Now they're looking, because all this soil has been so protected that there's lots of life down here. So they're looking for that, all the life down there. And there we have it, guys. New compost pile built in the chicken pen here. And that's been kind of a long time coming. Been waiting and waiting and gathering materials and kind of adding more and more carbon material, brown material into my pen here so I can build that up. So that's how I do it here. This is it's kind of the chicken tractor system inspired by Geoff Lawton. If you haven't seen that video, I'll link it above here. I highly recommend it. Geoff Lawton, he does amazing things, amazing permaculture instructor based in Australia. But his kind of chicken tractor system, that's kind of what inspired this like kick down chicken run system with my compost within the pile. And that's kind of what I'm following. So I'll leave that linked above so you can check it out. But essentially what I'm doing now is as this pile matures, the chickens are going to be more and more interested in it. And they're going to want to kind of scratch on it and spread it around. And then as they scratch and spread around, that's helping me turn the pile. And then about once a week, I'll actually be taking the temperature of the pile just to kind of monitor it a little bit. But I'll turn it as I need to for the temperature, but as it matures and gets older and older, I'll just repile the pile. Repile the pile, it's kind of a funny way to put it, right? But basically take anything that the chickens have kicked off, and I'll just turn the whole pile, and I'll just take anything they've kicked off and I'll put that right in the center of the pile, so that if anything did happen to it, it has a chance to heat up again, because usually that center of the pile is where it's the most hot, right in the center. So now that I built this pile, it should take depending on my ratios of materials, I suspect it actually heat up pretty quickly. I use a decent amount of manure. So we'll be monitoring that, and I'll be kind of taking you along that journey with me on the daily vlog. So watch the daily vlog. I'll just have a little bit of a segment about the compost, and we'll just check it every day, see how it's doing. And oftentimes, guys, if the materials aren't right, or you didn't get the right ratios, or you had old manure and it's not so hot, or those kind of things happen all the time. It takes a long time to really learn the process of composting. So don't feel like if you do it once and you didn't get it hot enough, or it's not turning into compost, that you're a failure and you're doing it wrong and you're never going to get it right. It takes time to learn this, guys, but the only way to learn it is to be doing it. So get out there and build your compost pile. Ask me if you have questions, reach out, leave a comment below, head on over to my website. I have a contact page there, so you can actually use that contact. It'll send it to my email, my business email, and I can actually have a back and forth with you via email. Lots of information there. I'm happy to help you guys. All right, well, my battery's low according to my phone, so I got to be wrapping this thing up. So that's the compost pile build for you. And if you do have any questions, feel free to reach out, and we'll be doing much more on this in the future. And yeah, until next time, have a good one.